We're super excited to talk today with Greg Osuri, CEO of Overclock Labs and founder of Akash Network. If you're a fan of the show, you've known I've been following this project for a long time, literally since its inception, because it really took me back to, as you may know here on the channel. If not, welcome, like and subscribe. I'm a filmmaker who's really into tech and into hardware. And so when I was in college, I went out to Las Vegas for the National Association of Broadcasters event. It's a massive convention that, every year it's like this meta. Okay, this year is going to be, 3D. This year is going to be, and so all the tech companies come and pitch to media that, hey, you need to use this if you want to grow your empires. So I came across, when I was in college, this group it was a modest sized booth at the time, and it was Amazon Web Services, and it was their first year out, and it was just like, their pitch was like, hey, you can use unused capacity in our massive network of servers. And I was just like, I instantly saw the vision, and that department has become the most profitable segment in Amazon by far. Like, apparently 75% of all profit at Amazon, 60 billion in 2021, 80 billion in 2022. This is a growing, clearly, marketplace of cloud compute. It's sort of this umbrella term right now where you're offering, CPU as well as now growing GPU, which we're going to talk about today because of the rise of AI. And so just AWS now controls about 33% of this market share that's of a marketplace that's about to burst into roughly estimates are about, $1.5 trillion by the end of this decade. But I don't think it's counting for the rise of AI. I think that number they came up with just based upon cloud services alone, because AI is really pushing the accelerator down to a degree where it's about $700,000 a day. These are conservative old estimates as well, that ChatGPT is burning and costing OpenAI per day, $700,000 per day. And we talk a lot about in the show sort of the consequences of that and how that limits media. We've talked about how Amazon has done this before. We know that, it costs a certain amount of money to hold titles so that you can have it on demand, et cetera. And if your movie's not making enough, if your content's not making enough, they're going to start to limit you. They're going to start to throttle you. They're going to cut you off the network completely. And so if you're performing for them, you're going to be making them money. And so that becomes sort of a very, cacophonized sort of platform suddenly, right? And so less voices, more mainstream, and sort of louder, and the types of content that perhaps we don't care about is just being marketed a little better. And so, we know the size of this marketplace, but it's just like, what if, the profits of something like that didn't go to CEO compensation, about $212 million last year-ish for, a CEO of Amazon, for instance. What if that money those profits went to, or like offsetting really bad business plays in hardware otherwise? That was the instance for me where I was really frustrated. I came across this amazing opportunity. I saw the vision, AWS. Oh my gosh, this is going to kill. Well, what do I do with that? Do I buy Amazon stock? Well, I'm just like, for me at the time, I'm just like, well, I can see that's a really interesting part of this business, but you're going to lose a lot of money here, trying to, make a laptop or, do these sort of things where there's other business practices that are intermingled within that vision that sort of make it a harder, less pure play, if you will. And so, that's why when I came across Akash a long time ago, I was just like, it was like early January 2021. I'm just like, this is decentralized AWS. This is genius. I get it. I understand it. I can participate in it. And again, I'm actually like, freaked out to share this with you guys. Like, it's at a time where the SEC is cracking down. They're naming names, like coming after people. But I really wanted to have this conversation with Greg because I wanted to try and diffuse a lot of that misconception about like, suddenly all of crypto is under attack. No, it's the ones that are, maintaining compliance. And I know that's even tough for Coinbase. So there's a lot of conversation we had around this because you look at, those that have been super compliant, like Coinbase, who are still under attack. but it's for certain aspects of their business, and because they're sort of putting themselves in a jeopardy by, there's this sort of, one rule which we'll talk about and which Greg points to in their way of analyzing which ones they should go after, which one is a security, which one, etc. It's a very, very, straightforward line. And I'll say that with like shrugging my shoulders. I'm not an SEC lawyer. I can bring a couple on, but that would really freak you guys out. A lot of friends in the biz, but I think they also have that sentiment where if somebody's maintaining compliance and, working towards compliance without being a huge, sore thumb, they're going to go after the bad actors first. They're going to go after the ones that are really being aggressive, that are, casting aside the laws. And so don't want to go too deep into that because that's for another time. So I really want to get into this recorded conversation I had with Greg. Greg is in the middle of, after Akash has recently, blown past $100 million market cap, has now moved into from San Francisco to Austin to open up a facility, a big facility in which to scale a huge program. We have the cloud compute with CPU, but now they're about to launch their GPU services in marketplace. And so very exciting time for Akash. And I'm very happy that he was able to hang out with us and note his cheeky t-shirt. This gives you the kind of sense of person he is and why I like him as a CEO. Welcome, Web3 Media friends. I'm super excited to welcome Greg Osuri, CEO of Overclock Labs, founder of Akash Network. Akash has so many things in it. I framed it up, just previous to this, but ultimately, this isn't your first rodeo when it comes to architecture and sort of design of this sort of, I don't know, how do you best explain, Akash?
Well, the simplest way to explain Akash is it's like, I'll use analogies because that's the best way to
You have to, because
things.
it really is a lot of big brain stuff going on, but at its core is a really ingenious way of accessing is essentially, the future of compute and cloud computing and AI rendering, all these things that are so necessary, and there's crises involved, and there's, these sort of things. If we're going to progress, we're going to need to, lower costs, or else, it will be stifled. The progress, I think, of what everyone's working on right now will be stifled. But Akash sits in this very, very interesting apex of understanding like how to decentralize it all.
Yeah, the simplest way to understand is it's an open market for compute. So think of it like Airbnb for data centers. Just the simplest way to understand.
Sure.
I mean, that's just like dumbing it down as much as possible. But really, what's happening is, there is an enormous amount of underutilized compute capacity all around the world, and that is creating enormous amounts of problems. A big challenge we see today with the cost of AI, machine learning. The cost is directly proportional to the availability of these chips that run the AI. And these chips are called GPUs. You've probably heard of them. And in that GPUs, there are certain types of GPUs. NVIDIA makes them. They're called high density GPUs. You call them, H100s and A100s are the famous types of high density. They are in such high demand that it takes 2 years to get it from NVIDIA if you make an order right now. They're harder to get than Rolexes and whatever luxury goods you're into, right? And not because they don't want to make them, they just can't, right? There's a very complex supply chain that's involved here. Without getting into it, but there are people with these chips that are sitting on them because they want these chips when they want them, kind of thing. So a lot of times people just buy up chips even though they need them or not. So this is just one example in where Akash can enable these chips to come to market where the owners can retain their ownership, but get liquidity, right? That's just a very simple way to do it. And why we're doing this, right? Why is because your data, my data, all our data and all our information today is managed by something called the cloud. Everything, including this recording and this very podcast, is uploaded to the cloud as we're talking about it. So cloud is so integral and so invisible in our lives that you and I, we pay a cloud tax, like it or not, right? We don't know about them, you just pay them. If you use Netflix, if you use Dropbox, if you use Gmail, if you use any of these tools that you use every day, 50% of what you pay goes to an invisible tax collector called a cloud. And no one talks about them because this is so deep down the stack that it's not really for us consumers to talk about. And that's the beauty of these products. But we all pay. And the reason we pay so much high taxes because the availability to run the cloud, the resources to run the cloud are heavily gated. So much so, the entire industry is a oligopoly, similar to what we see with telcos, right? Fortunately, with AT&T, telcos, I mean, for the longest time, there was such an incredible oligopoly, sometimes even monopoly. Government has to step in and break them down, like break AT&T down, without which we wouldn't have the internet. Think about it. So we are similar in cloud infrastructure. Cloud is the new telco, and it's heavily gated, and that gatedness is translating into us paying this invisible tax. And now it's coming to a point where companies that want to innovate on AI are unable to because cloud companies wouldn't give them the resources because they're in such high demand and they're very selective about who gets these resources. B, they're getting priced out by the demand itself by large companies. Elon Musk, for example, bought about 10,000 H100s a few months ago. People like that are buying up these chips for starting their own AI companies, so they're getting priced out. That's where we see an incredible opportunity now as Akash is moving into the GPU marketplace in the next couple of weeks. We have a testnet that's vibing really well, and you have this amazing opportunity to tap into this underserved AI market, and that's where all this hype, all this attention for Akash is coming from.
When you talk about the oligopoly, I think we're talking about there's the big three, right? There's AWS, there's Google, and is it Microsoft? Are
Correct.
the big three?
And you say Alibaba in the East.
And Alibaba. And so when you talk about those, do they play in a sense to maintain their dominance? Do they play a bit dirty? Do they sort of edge their dominance in what ways?
They do. In fact, U.S. government is investigating Amazon Web Services for anti-competitive practices now. There were a lot of lawsuits, from the industry that I believe have been settled, but essentially tell you that the oligarchs are stifling innovation because it's in their best interest, and this is how the system is set up. It's not like they're bad people or good people. It's just
that much money. We're talking about an insane amount of money. It was like 2021, Amazon, AWS did 60 billion. 2022 is 80 billion. I mean, we're talking about a marketplace that before the end of the decade is going to be well worth $1.5 trillion. And that's just in the compute side. I don't even know if that's, putting into account the AI push of this year, of just like everyone realizing, oh my gosh, we're going to need processing, we're going to need rendering at an incredible pace.
Yeah, I mean, I think the Amazon Web Services unit alone is valued at around $500 billion last I checked. And I think that's like that number is fairly old. And the kind of demand for AI we're seeing, considering the complexity of AI models is doubling every 6 months. Along with that, the demand for these chips is also proportional. And it's easy to see in the next 5 to 10 years where this market is going. I mean, it'll be way over trillions of dollars, right? Because AI is very different from mobile. And the reason why I say this is AI is intelligence. Mobile is convenience, right? So if you think what mobile did to the internet, which is essentially making the user base exponential, especially in countries like India and China, intelligence is going to quadruple, if not more, because this is augmenting. So far, intelligence has been reserved for human beings alone, but now we have a machine that's augmenting human intelligence. So that way, our productivity has a potential to increase by in exponential terms. Like basic things, I use AI a lot every day for simple things like researching. Right. The other day, I was trying to find, I don't know, when each GPUs were released so that I can do some research. So I went to ChatGPT and said, well, give me a table of all the GPUs and the release dates in a CSV format. Done. Imagine trying to do that with Google.com.
You're trying to
Imagine,
do
so
that
it makes
with absolutely dumb requests like mine, like, how old are tabby cats? Like, how long do they live? It's just like there's so much, as you said, you put it nicely, intelligence, but I think that there's a lot of just query, a lot of mindless almost interest of like, wow, I wonder, what I look like, as a 15th century queen, these things that AI can contribute in terms of the popular culture. But it's just you can understand the massive amount of it, just going that entire spectrum of like, yeah, really intelligent research to what I'm going to do to this background. I want to make it look like I'm in a castle.
right. So, I mean, I'm just giving you a business example as to how me as a non-engineer uses AI, right? Like as an engineer, I don't think I write code anymore without AI assistance, right? I mean, I've been writing code for 25 years. And this, I believe, when I started using Copilot, in that experience, in that 25 years, this is the first time I saw a fundamental, I mean, not first time, second time, I would say, I saw a fundamental shift in how we write code. And that just changed everything for me. My productivity as an engineer it increased at least 10 times, I would say. And along with that, my productivity as a researcher. If you think about things we do, either in business or at work, is most of the time just researching, just looking up things, right? Like, I mean, at least in creative fields, right? It's just
Coming up with
grunt
reference,
work.
coming up with ideas, and that's what it seems like it's doing for programming as well. Is it's coming up with the general idea that allows you
Correct.
to go in and iterate and express your creativity, your what makes you special.
You still need the human to steer the boat and to tell it what to pick and what looks right and what doesn't look right. But end of the day, it's augmenting intelligence, which is a completely different thing than making it convenient to access. And that's why there's no doubt the hype and the demand is going to go
With
along
that
with it.
given hype and demand, I feel like it came, hot and heavy in 2023. And as like, all these projects that have been working for years started to, come to market with products that were very, very novel and very, very interesting and very visual and very easy to access to some degree. And so how has that changed the drive from Akash? Because I felt like Akash was very strong on compute, and then suddenly, like, does it shift the things in terms of like, point of view for Akash or where it's going, or were you guys ready for that all along?
If you So some history for Akash, right? We wrote uh, so Akash is built on the foundation laid by the elders, I would say, right? So really, Akash's lineage goes back all the way to 2013, when I quit Angel Hack, the company I founded before Akash, which was a hackathon-based accelerator, to focus exclusively on this new set of technologies called container native infrastructure technologies, Docker, Kubernetes, and all that, as a solution to this increasing power of the cloud. So I started work in 2013, created the company Overclock Labs in 2015. And same around that time, the idea of a super cloud was just getting was introduced by Cornell University, right? So it fascinated me, the idea that, hey, you can actually use a heterogeneous device sets across different providers and actually build an interface on top of that that gives you homogeneity a cloud user would get. What that means is I can distribute my application across different providers and have the same experience that I would have using a single provider. So that was very attractive for me, not only for me, for a whole industry, both academia as well as industry. So I created Overclock Labs to make the super cloud a reality. In 2018, we wrote a paper called Akash Network. the decentralized supercloud. They're introducing the idea that, hey, look, supercloud is good, but without a way to acquire resources, supercloud is not very useful. So we added the marketplace component to it. And a key ideology in that is AI machine learning is getting expensive. Cloud is getting very, very expensive. I mean, if you read the paper in 2018, you'll know exactly everything I said now is very, very obvious, but back then it wasn't. And we did this deep thesis on why AI needs a super cloud. And then we started working on enabling GPUs. In fact, in 2019, we introduced this product called, or the intent to ship this product called Super Mini, if you remember.
Oh yes, I
It's
remember that
probably
the website used to pop up with the picture of this beautifully designed, like sort of like little thing. You're like, well, what is that? Like, how do? Oh, is it a miner? What do I do with it?
it was not a miner. It was a
No,
machine.
it wasn't.
It was a GPU, a very incredible machine with GPUs to train AI, right? So we've been trying to push homogeneity because AI requires a lot of like high-end chips and requires a degree of homogeneity. So we thought the way to achieve this is to actually make a device. Unfortunately, COVID hit and we were unable to like do anything hardware because that required a lot of collaboration in physical collaboration that we were prevented from. And so we essentially scrape the project and with the notion that we need to focus on software and let's try to get the GPUs out from 2019. So if you look at my Twitter, if you look at our blog posts, we all talk about GPUs and AI from 2019, 2020. And 2020 is when GPT came, the GPT-3. It was not very popular. I mean, it was in the AI circles, you kind of knew how powerful it was, but it was also very heavily gated by OpenAI. OpenAI being a very close company, so it didn't have the sort of uh like access to the globe, and it was API only, so people didn't really know the power behind it. 2023, Chat GPT, which is essentially a client on OpenAI, Chat GPT, I mean GPT-3 was introduced. That made it very obvious to people that, hey, AI, this is what you could do. The technology was there for a long time. So it's not something that it looks like an overnight like pivot, but it's and that's usually how it looks for deep tech that's been around for so long, and suddenly just one little knob that was twisted and that changed everything, right? Like GPT-3 had zero adoption
Yeah, it's the
till
cultural
Chat
awareness.
GPT-3 came, right?
As you
And
as you said, it had like this tangibility once you could just from the user standpoint just do a query and understand sort of the power of it, of a large language model, and having all of this information digested for you, and so then you can really see like, oh my gosh, the accessibility of it, I think, really opens it up. Is there a, I guess, a turning point or a tipping point for Akash where Akash becomes, less of like sort of the as we're saying, like it seems for me anyway that like it's so one of those companies that you don't really talk about, that's under sort of like everything. Is there a tipping point where, is it a partner, is it a integration? What is it ideally that sort of lights the fires, if you will, for Akash?
similar to GPT and Chat GPT, it's a client. It's going to be a client, right? It's a client that makes it very, very obvious. And the client could be anything. So we have 4 different clients today. You know, some of them functioning in production, some of them are being built. We have, in fact, 2 other clients too being built by large providers. The ones that I was frowning upon. I mean, these a lot of times these, I think industry is coming around now. People are realizing the structural problems with big cloud. So they themselves are, in fact, looking at decentralized technologies. It's not a secret anymore. You see folks from Google and Amazon tweet about Akash quite a lot. They're like blockchain teams at least. So it's not like a secret anymore. So a lot of these networks are realizing that, hey, GPUs are a problem. We need a way to offset this GPU problem because that's more money for everybody, right? Like if there's demand, if you're able
It's
to
a significant reduction too. We're not just talking about like, oh, you're saving 10%, 20% here. This is by decentralizing and leveraging, unused resources. It's like in the magnitude of like 85%, 90% savings. Yes.
Correct. In some cases, yes.
Yeah.
But that's not for everything. Like for example, um, GPUs like A100s are probably more expensive than a cloud because the demand is so high.
Mm.
Akash is an auction-based marketplace, right? So it really is, whatever the buyer wants to set, the price is set. So I mean, it's a reverse auction. So there are buyers now that are looking for access. They just are willing to pay how much ever they want to use a compute, because for them it's no longer about cost efficiencies. It's about getting the chips that they want to train their models and whatnot, right?
Yeah.
So
Trust me, I've
it's
been through the Ethereum gas wars. I know well this tax for participation to engage and to have access.
right, right. So yeah, so we are transitioning it, I think, from Akash from like a cheap cloud to the access cloud, just like how we transitioned with Airbnb from a $20 bread and breakfast option when they began to now the only place to get a French villa, right? Like so it's no longer about low cost and cheap cloud. It is about getting access to the resources that you are denied in other markets.
Interesting. You raised the super mini, and it sort of caused a wave of nostalgia amongst sort of my early days of interest in Akash. And one of those early things on the roadmap that excited me was the staking. And so like you would stake your Akash, and it was like such a high emission rate, and it was like, oh, that's exciting. But looking at sort of the roadmap ahead, it was also, once that tapered down, there was this idea of profit participation, or participation within sort of the income of the network. Has the recent Gensler attacks tempered those sort of visions for it?
No, it hasn't at all. Uh, and the reason for that is Akash is sufficiently decentralized to a point that the recent allegations on the aforementioned tokens are very, from our analysis. Now, I'm not a lawyer, I mean, but I did speak to enough lawyers to get this take and opinion. From my analysis, the issue happens to be with how the asset accrues value. If the asset accrual, value accrual mechanism is dependent on a single company, single organization, or a collusion of organizations in private, then that's considered security. Because without that organization or that group of people, the value of asset will collapse.
Interesting.
But if the value comes from doesn't come in that manner, in the sense that anybody can contribute to the value of that asset, anybody can access that asset in a permissionless way. If the playing field is leveled, you don't normally have that asset. And that's the difference between gold and Apple stock, right? Like, gold can be mined by anybody in the world as long as it's a gold reserve, right? Whereas Apple stock can only be issued by Apple. Apple stock is a security and gold is not, even though the expectation of profit exists for both. I don't think expectation of profit constitutes something to be a security or not. It's really how that profit or how that value is accrued.
Maybe this is why
Right.
that Bitcoin was sort of removed from that list. There's a definite separation in terms of
Yeah, I buy Bitcoin because I expect the Bitcoin number to go up, right? Or a whole at least, right? I buy gold because the number goes up. Again, I don't use gold for anything else. Same thing for silver, right? So the notion that you're expecting profit from something is not doesn't make it a security or not. Now what we have done with Akash, and we take this very, very seriously, is radical decentralization, in the sense you see most of the time technologies are decentralized from an architectural and a code perspective. Every chain is decentralized to a certain degree. They have their own validators or whatever scheme that they have. But if you drill down, you'll notice the biggest attack vector is the people writing code. In the sense, if you remove the people that write the code, the blockchain stops, or doesn't evolve, or goes out of functionality or something. So that's really where the attack vectors are. If you remove that attack vector, then it becomes a lot more resilient. So that's why Overclock Labs created Akash Network, but Overclock Labs is no longer the only contributor to Akash Network. We have 10, if not other 10 to 15 organizations, about 280 developers, out of which that contribute to Akash code base, out of which maybe 20 people are employed by Overclock Labs, right? So 90% of contributors come from outside Overclock Labs. That means outside the issuer, right? So it is getting bigger, and that gap is getting the number is getting bigger and bigger, right? So we're in a year or 2 years time, maybe 99% will come from outside Overclock Labs, and that's the goal we're working towards. So I think the issue from the US government happens to be like, how are investors protected if there is, you know, private entities that are touting as decentralized networks, you know, essentially, and making them securities happens to the issue. So I'm not calling these tokens that were named as decentralized. I mean, there's a lot of facts that seem to be very skewed here. I mean, I think I
I
have
mean,
deep
does it
respect for
does it, does
Solana,
it, does it affect
Cardano, and all that.
Akash to some degree where Cosmos is named in that specifically as well? And that, is kind of the layer zero in which the ecosystem Akash runs in, correct?
No, Akash doesn't use Cosmos. Atom is named, not Cosmos Hub. I mean, so not Cosmos.
Yeah.
We have a branding problem in Cosmos. Akash is a layer one blockchain with a native token called AKT token that secures Akash network. It happens to use Cosmos SDK, which is a code base. It has nothing to do with Cosmos network, except for the fact that it can interoperate with other networks. And Cosmos Hub happens to be one of the networks. Akash can interoperate with it, but Akash has no dependency or reliance on Atom, the asset that was named as a security in the allegations by SEC.
Gotcha. Thanks for making that delineation. I think that helps, clarify a lot of, sort of, it just seemed like a grenade being thrown, in the ecosystem, but it being a different type of network, as you said, it's just an offer. It seems more like a community. And I think one of the things that sort of, I gained a lot of respect for you. It's funny you're wearing the FTX shirt because it's just like, it had like, it's very ironic. We're talking about decentralization as you're wearing the FTX shirt, but it's showing the importance, wearing it ironically show the importance, but also within, Cosmos, there was, it's clear that there's a community because there was, and I mean this in a social way and in this sort of way where, when, Terra happened and that meltdown happened, you were at the forefront of talking about exactly this. Okay, guys, this is what's happening. This is the delineation. This is how we're not affected. This is how they're not affected. And I felt like, it was such a moving thing to see, sort of support Sunny and like, Osmos. It was just like, you could tell that you were really taking a leadership standpoint in talking about these things.
Yes. Oh, that re-aged me at least a year. It was the Akash network was not impacted, but a lot of our community members, including myself, were impacted by the collapse. And it was a very expensive lesson to us, and not to take things by face value. And my mistake was to go easy on the due diligence for Luna and UST, and rely on expert opinions, which was another big mistake, right? So, but what it really showed, I think two key takeaways there. Right? Big takeaway was decentralized systems are really hard to halt, to stop, because there was an instance where we had pools, UST Osmo pool, which is very attractive returns. That pool was being drained because of this arbitrage opportunity, and we wanted to stop that. And the only way to stop that is to go through a community vote and a proposal and a code base that that should do that. So who does it? So we had to move so many people, call the validators, ask them to make this emergency proposal. It was a crazy few days. for me to get that rolling. That tells you how resilient and strong the system is, right? It's very, very strong to make something happen. And second, severing the connection from Terra to Osmosis. That was another crazy run, right? And third, um, and I have to go make a proposal. Now, I being a Terra, a non, I would say like not OG community member of Terra, I was just an outsider. Me making a proposal in the Terra, on the Terra blockchain, and having the proposal actually pass as an outsider shows you that anyone can actually make a proposal. But Terra, for all its bad things, the technology stood the test of stress, right? It was heavily centralized in terms of like control, but I was able to go and make a proposal. And actually, when you remove the center head, which is like Do Kwon, the community actually came together. So a lot of things I learned that, hey, these are decentralized communities. Outsiders can actually go make a difference. I wouldn't consider myself as a deep Terra community member, but I could make a difference. And that's why we need decentralized systems, right? And that was a big lesson for us to even design our our approach as to how we address such issues in case things of that nature happen, right? So I think overall we as an ecosystem got much stronger after Terra Luna, and you can clearly see there are factions in Cosmos, in the sense, just like countries, just like alliances, right? Like you have essentially, when it comes to which direction the shared security should go. Should it go in the Cosmos hub direction where you have interchain security, or should it go in the Osmosis XLR Akash direction where you have the mesh security, right? Or then you have Babylon, which is extending Bitcoin security, right? You have three different options for shared security. One of them will win, maybe all of them will win. Maybe you'll find a common ground, but that just tells you how decentralized this ecosystem is. I was surprised to see Atom being marked as a security, and it was very sloppy job too. So Atom was listed. Atom's only security on Binance and not a security on Coinbase. It's a lot of things that needs to be broken down. I think there's some indication there's corruption happening here at the SEC level too. So we don't know, and we can't take anything what SEC says for on face value, whether they consider an asset as security or commodity. I think now it's up to the courts and the legislative branch to really to check the executive branch overreach. And it's not a hidden fact that the executive branch actually hates crypto. I mean, Biden himself said crypto is got the economic report from the Biden White House basically said crypto is a scam, and the tweets indicate that. And Senator Warren obviously launched an anti-crypto army, and they're using the executive powers, executive overreach to attack industry. Unprecedented. I don't
Which
think
is
it's
obviously also influenced by their donors, by those that influence them, and so it's great that
sure.
there's that great check.
And they're using the bad actors like FTXs and Celsius of the world to paint us in a bad way, right? Like, and it's surprising because like Akash Network and along with other networks have being used or being experimented inside Department of Defense, right? I mean, DoD sees the value of Akash Network. They're doing a proof of concept internally to consolidate their supply. So when you see one branch of the military, one branch of the government, which I consider the purest, no nonsense branch, which is the military, seeing the value in decentralized networks, and when you have the other executive branches that want to curl it down, so it's just unfortunate
The
where we
big
are.
takeaway for me though was your ability to influence the outcome by coming up with a great idea for a proposal during that crisis. And that gives me sort of hope. It takes away from my fear of the Terminator scenario where AI has taken over, like, the cloud. And it's scary because Akash is also known as, it used to be, it's still, maybe still the unstoppable cloud. But it sounds
So,
like that's a misnomer because it actually means the decentralization just allows for great ideas to be heard within the system, right?
well, it's stoppable if everybody in the world wants to stop it. Every token holder wants to stop it,
Yeah.
right? So it's unstoppable otherwise. So it really puts the power or control in the common than the corporate, right? The idea of Akash is to decentralize power to a point where we as human society has you know power over our feudalistic overlords, right? Like, because that's what this is about. That's what democracy is about. And another fun fact about Akash is Akash means sky in Sanskrit. We picked the name because sky is where the clouds are formed, or where the clouds meet. So that's where the name comes from. But Akash Network in English is Sky Network. If you shorten it, you end up with a Skynet. That was not by design. If you
Completely
remember what
designed, and now you're just going to tear off your mask and just be a.
So if you translate Akash Network to English, you'll see where that's going. A Skynet is an unstoppable network with GPUs, ideal for training machines, and unstoppable because there is no identifiable requirement or a permission requirement to use Akash Network. Anyone can use Akash Network without differentiating themselves between a human and a machine. So
Now, how can
it'd be
they?
interesting.
This is a challenge for me in particular. Is like, how can somebody who's not a programmer participate? From my standpoint, it's like, yeah, I can get some Atom on Coinbase and then AMM swap it on Osmosis Zone to get some AKT. I can stake it and be part of the with a validator to help decentralize the network and participate in that way. But how can others participate in areas of like deployment and utilizing the technology?
I mean, that's a challenge. Akash is a product for developers, right? It's not a consumer product. It never will be a consumer product unless consumer products are built on top of Akash, which, in fact, if you use Osmosis, you're using Akash on the in the background because Osmosis runs on Akash. If you're using Mars protocol, you're using Akash. Looks like DYDX is going to be deployed on Akash as well, the front end. So you are using Akash with or without knowing you're using Akash. And that's just going to be it's just going to be how it is, because you do require a degree of technical understanding to use the product. It is a technical product.
And so that's where that layer of being AWS and like sort of having that need for that integration or that client on top of it, like a chat GPT to access it, becomes so valuable. And so fingers crossed that we are able to sort of identify what those are in the future, because I think that it's such a brilliant idea, and it's something that in my setup, in my opening talk, I talk about my first experience with AWS and finding them in college. And I was like, this is genius. Like, this is, and they were like, we think so. And like, this is very, very early. And they were at NAB, National Association of Broadcasters, trying to present to media, hey, this is a product that can be used. Nobody understood it. Everyone's like walking by the booth. But like, I sat there and I took the time to talk to them. I was like, this is going to change everything. And I think that Akash has that same potential here. And so I'm hoping that this is going to be the first of many talks, because I think that Akash is going to do many wonderful things, but also I think that you're a great thought leader in this space, and I appreciate you taking the time to dumb it down for us a little bit so that we can understand the grand vision that's in your head through all these years of technical understanding, and also a passion for clearly decentralization and the democratization of our future in technology.
Thank you. We're just getting started.
All right, we'll check you later.